I know you're putting maybe a good face on it, Colin, because you were punished, now whether for this reason or other ones, at the polls. Two pretty disastrous results: 2017 Assembly election and then general election. I'm just wondering what that says about this idea of working together across the aisle.
Well, first of all, I don't think they're connected, but I also don't think, in terms of the Assembly election, we were punished. I think our numbers stayed the same in a reduced Assembly. So all the 6-seaters became 5-seaters, and we ended up with the same number of seats, which I think in that very, very difficult climate, and if you can remember back, it was very hot and heavy. It was very DUP v Sinn Féin, and Martin McGuinness dying. That was a very, very difficult election. And but I think we held our own and did quite well, actually. The Westminster election wasn't good. Pretty clear that wasn't good. We were very honest about that. We lost 3 seats in within the space of half an hour, and it was very difficult. But I don't think that was to do with. I don't think it was to do with us not being in kind of a partnership with the Ulster Unionist Party. It was more to do with the climate at the time. Very difficult, all related back to Brexit, actually, but very, very difficult to try to cut through with a sensible argument in that moment.
You mentioned the general election, and I want to kind of talk about that. What happened in Foyle in 2017 is my first question, because I was looking at the stats again today. I mean, that was the seat held by the SDLP since its creation. It had never even really been close. And your candidate, Mark Durkan, lost by fewer than 200 votes. Was it complacency that year? What was the cause of that? Because then you won it back, and in your defence, you now have a seat. What is it? A 17,000 seat majority, one of the highest in the UK. What was the cause of that disastrous loss in 2017?
Well, be careful what I say, but I think there were big irregularities around proxy voting and some other things, but that's not new. But we were very clear that there were issues there, and I think the Electoral Office have resolved some of those issues, but some still exist. And I think we would have won without that, but the margin still would have been a lot smaller than it should have been. A large part, this is largely to do with the emotion around, I think, Martin McGuinness dying, and the anger at Arlene Foster around RHA and the crocodiles and all of that. And you have to put yourself back in that place. It was a very, very emotional time, and very difficult for kind of a common sense argument to cut through the middle. And people just were wanting to, frankly, punish the DUP. And that was one way in which they did it. I never believed it was permanent. I never believed that we wouldn't get it back, and we could see a route back through the council elections, where we did very well, and then obviously on to the Westminster election in 19, where we weren't really expecting an election to come that quick, but when it came, we were ready. We did an awful lot of work on the ground to be ready for that. And I mean, I think the people spoke very clearly in that election.
Don't worry, I will get to 2019 when it all seems a bit brighter. I just want to focus on 2017. I know it's awful for a minute. Did you think about? I know. Did you think about resigning at all at that time? Yeah,
I did, surely.
And why didn't you, I suppose? Because if you had, people could have easily said, well, that kind of makes sense.
Oh, yeah, no, I would have understood it. I had, over that particular weekend, I spent a lot of time thinking and speaking to friends, and I wrote the resignation letter, a resignation statement, but I never issued it. And I was very honest at the time that I thought about it. Because I felt that you have to be responsible as a leader for bad elections, but then I also believed that we could turn it around, and that there were things that we could do, and that you have to remember, the SDLP were a very low ebb for a long time, and we were only beginning to rebuild. And in the north, it takes a long time to change people's perception of you. We also had election after election after election. We never had a break. And I think we needed a bit of time to regroup and regather and get people to look at us again. And that's what we ended up doing. So I decided that it was better to stay and fight and to continue. And I knew I had a route and a pathway to actually getting us back on our feet again.
How close were you, Colum? I mean, was it a finger hovering over the send button, or did it never quite get that far?
Well, I mean, I thought about it. you know, for a day or two, and well, you don't have very long, you know, and I analysed the election result. I came to the conclusion that yes, there were things we could have done better, but we were in an atmosphere that was almost impossible to fight against, and we were hearing that, you know, unionists were just wanting to vote for the DUP everywhere, no matter what, and nationalists just wanted to vote for Sinn Féin. It was just that kind of the worst version of our politics was at the fore, and parties like ours weren't gonna prosper in the middle of that. And I felt that we had a route back to victory, and we would just get on with the job. And you know, I made the decision, and then that was the end of that, and got stuck in again.
Of course, then we'll jump forward to 2019, and the successes achieved there. One of the questions that was sent into us on the back of that was the SDLP result in 2019 a one-off success based on anti-Brexit sentiment?
No, I don't think so. And if you look at the council elections in certain areas, we were beginning to build. There's a lot more to do. We're not at all complacent, and we're building now towards the next election next year. And you'll have seen us bringing in Cara Hunter, Sinead McLaughlin, Matthew O'Toole, and we're putting people forward in front and centre who are young and talented and new. And we needed that. You know, we needed to freshen up. But just before that, Claire Hanna was brought in, Nicola Mallon was brought. You know, our top team now is young and fresh and different. It's a new generation with new things to say. So that was a big part of the work that we were engaged in doing. And you know, elections kept getting in the way, but we then got a bit of space to do it. The Brexit context, of course, helped. You know, because we had in places like Derry, we had an MP who wouldn't turn up to vote against Brexit, which I think people found just astonishing. Also, the Assembly being down and people's frustration, that was all wrapped up in it. But I do think also people were beginning to look again at us. And Claire Hanna is a fantastic candidate and now a fantastic MP. And people were able to unite around her in South Belfast. I think we had a very broad coalition of voters in Derry. I mean, if you look at some of the tallies in places where we got very, very high votes, I mean, people would have been shocked, and they kept telling us before the election it was going to be very tight. I think within a couple of days of the election being called, we knew we were going to win, but we didn't know it was going to, and we thought it was going to be quite big, but we didn't think it was going to be that big, obviously. But we don't take any of that for granted, and we know some of those votes are loaned and all of that, but we do think we have the basis of building something. I also think in South Down, if we had more time, we could have taken that seat. And you know, Margaret's decision kind of didn't give us much space and time to get ready. But that's in the sights for the next time. But the big challenge now is the Assembly election next year. I think we put in a very good show.